Music Reform and Sunday Law Preparation for Seventh-day Adventists, preparing hearts for pure worship, unwavering obedience, and faithful end-time readiness before the final test of worship. A call to purity in worship. The closing scenes of Earth's history will test every area of Christian experience, including the music that fills our minds, homes, and worship services. Music is not merely entertainment. It is a powerful influence upon the thoughts, emotions, and spiritual life. As the world moves toward the final conflict over worship and obedience, God is calling His people to examine whether their musical choices are drawing them closer to Christ or preparing them for deception. The issue of worship will stand at the center of the Sunday law crisis, making music reform an important part of spiritual preparation. Music and the battle for the mind. Satan understands the power of music because he once held a high position in heaven before his rebellion against God. Music has the ability to shape character, influence decisions, and affect spiritual discernment. Ellen White warns in Child Guidance, chapter Music, that music can be a great blessing when properly used, but can also become one of Satan's most effective agencies when abused. As the final crisis approaches, believers must guard the avenues of the soul from influences that weaken their relationship with Christ. Daniel's example of faithfulness. The third chapter of Daniel presents one of the clearest end-time illustrations of false worship. King Nebuchadnezzar commanded all people to bow before the golden image when they heard the sound of musical instruments. Daniel 3:5 states that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image. Music was used as a tool to unite people in disobedience to God. This event foreshadows the final worship crisis described in prophecy. Worship and obedience in the last days. The issue in Daniel chapter 3 was not music itself, but the use of music to encourage compromise with God's law. The faithful Hebrews refused to bow, despite overwhelming social pressure. In the coming Sunday law crisis, many will face similar pressure to conform to popular religious practices. The lessons of Daniel teach that true worship must always be governed by obedience to God, rather than emotional excitement or majority opinion. Preparing the heart through sacred music. The book Steps to Christ, chapter Growing Up into Christ, emphasizes the importance of keeping the heart connected with heaven. Sacred music can strengthen faith, encourage prayer, and elevate the mind toward God. Songs that focus upon Christ's sacrifice, righteousness, and soon return help prepare believers to stand firm when trials come. Music should inspire reverence, purity, humility, and obedience, rather than excitement, sensuality, or self-exaltation. The influence of music in the home. Ellen White counsels in Adventist Home, chapter Music, that music should be used to create a heavenly atmosphere within the family. The home serves as the first training ground for end-time preparation. When parents allow worldly influences to dominate family life, spiritual sensitivity is weakened. However, when homes are filled with sacred hymns, scripture songs, and worshipful melodies, children learn to love truth and develop stronger spiritual foundations. Reverence in worship. The final conflict will center upon worship, making reverence increasingly important. In the Great Controversy, chapters dealing with the final warning message and the enforcement of false worship reveal that the world will be divided over obedience to God's commandments. Worship services should reflect the holiness of God. Music that resembles worldly entertainment can blur the distinction between the sacred and the common, reducing the sense of reverence that God desires among His people. Music and character development. Character preparation is essential for surviving the final crisis. Ellen White writes in Child Guidance chapter Music that proper music helps cultivate noble thoughts and upright character. Every song we repeatedly hear leaves impressions upon the mind. Music that promotes pride, rebellion, sensuality, or self-centeredness gradually weakens spiritual resistance. Music that exalts Christ, strengthens faith, and helps believers develop the character necessary to stand during the time of trouble. Health reform and musical influences. The principles of health reform extend beyond diet and physical habits. In the Ministry of Healing, chapter Mind Cure, Ellen White explains the connection between mental influences and spiritual well-being. Music affects emotions, thought patterns, and even physical responses. Harsh, chaotic, or sensual forms of music can agitate the mind, while uplifting and sacred music promotes peace, clarity, and spiritual focus. Preparing for the Sunday law crisis requires protecting both body and mind from harmful influences. Developing spiritual discernment. Daniel demonstrated unwavering discernment because his relationship with God had been developed long before the crisis arrived. Daniel 1:8 declares that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. This principle applies equally to music reform. Decisions regarding entertainment and worship should be made before the crisis comes. Those who cultivate discernment today will be better equipped to recognize deception tomorrow. The loud cry and pure worship. As God's people proclaim the final warning message to the world, their lives must reflect the purity of heaven. Music will play an important role in encouraging faith and strengthening believers during difficult times. Sacred songs have historically comforted God's people during persecution, imprisonment, and hardship. The remnant church will need music that directs hearts toward Christ rather than toward human performance or emotional excitement. Standing faithful until the end. The faithful Hebrews stood before the fiery furnace because they had already chosen loyalty to God. Likewise, those preparing for the Sunday law crisis must allow God to reform every aspect of life, including their music. Daniel 3:17-18 reveals their unwavering commitment to obedience regardless of the consequences. Through prayer, Bible study, music reform, and complete surrender to Christ, believers can develop the faith necessary to stand during Earth's final conflict. As the world moves toward the last great test of worship, may every song, every melody, and every act of praise draw hearts closer to Jesus and prepare his people for his soon return.
Thank you for listening to this message from SDA Wisdom, preparing Seventh-day Adventists for the final crisis and Christ's return. We truly pray that you were blessed, strengthened, and encouraged in your walk with Christ. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss content designed to prepare you for what is coming. Also, don't forget to leave a comment below, join the community, and share this message. Help us grow this ministry and spread God's truth to those who are seeking clarity, conviction, and spiritual strength in these last days. Together, we are preparing a people to stand firm, stay ready, and walk in obedience. Stay faithful, stay ready, walk in truth. We'll see you in the next video.